Hello everybody, Chris here from Truly Holistic, and welcome to episode 4 of the 10 days, 10 videos, 10 topics. Now in this video we're going to be talking about the human being or the human as a computer. Okay, for anyone that does sessions with myself for a wee while now, they'll notice that we use a lot of terminology that is relevant to the way we look at a computer and the way that we address these problems that we have with the human body. Okay, and was this something that I had in mind? No, this is information that came through in regards to looking at it in a specific way. And the key with my work is the more specific the intent is, the more specific we can do the healing, okay, or more powerful the healing is. So instead of using terminology, which we're going to get into in a lot more precise manner, instead of using the terminology of DNA and RNA, we just see it for what it is. It's essentially coding, okay? So we use another name for it that, again, is very relevant to the way that we look at programming, we look at the computer. And we're going to talk a lot about that in this session. Now, before we get into the human body as a computer, we must also take into account what is reality. And there was a path, or I guess a junction in my path as a healer, a true quantum healer, was every day we were working on entities, removing negative energies and all these sorts of things, which were really at the core of what we were finding was creating a physical manifestation of an illness or a disease. And we were just clearing out entity after entity after entity. And it got to a point where I came to this junction. I thought, this is not good enough. You know, these people are spending hard-earned money. They're coming wanting me to heal their issues and really help them with their issues. And me just clearing out an entity and next time them coming back, clearing another entity wasn't good enough for me. I needed to figure out why the entity was here, why the entity was attaching to that person. What is the reason the entity is here for? What's their game? Why do they need us? So for me, I asked myself this question and created this as a focus and a goal for the rest of my healing dharma, I guess, or purpose. What is reality? Okay, because if we can understand what reality is, then we can get a bigger picture on what these entities are all about, where they come from. How can we remove anything if we don't fully understand why they're here and where they're coming from? So for me, that was such a pinnacle moment in really awakening myself as a healer myself. Okay, and like anybody coming to my session work, again, it's not about just doing clearing after clearing after clearing. It's about giving that person or that client an understanding of why it's there, why we did the clearing, okay? Because then we can paint a picture, okay? It's not about them just coming to a session for 45 minutes and me doing a whole lot of clearings and saying, see ya, I'll see you next week. It's about them continuing that healing process, because a big part of that healing process for that client is when they're not with me. Okay, the whole thing about this journey and being here is about being in the moment and being in the present moment, and that's moment after moment after moment. You could have hundreds of thousands of moments in between sessions with me, and who's making those choices at that time? Who's bringing that awareness, that focus at that time? And that's you, the client. Okay. So if you have greater understanding, greater knowing, and that's what really Ascension is all about, because it's all about being at ease with self, with your true self, and your place here in this whole picture, this reality. Okay? So with that said, with my focus on what is reality and understanding reality, all of a sudden, I was being channeled with information through true intuition. And true intuition is letting information come through you, not searching for it, okay? Because when we search, we get very mind-orientated. This has to be from the heart, Okay, and this information I'm going to share with you now as the human as the computer within this reality was channeled through to me. It was brought to me. I didn't search for it. It was brought to me in a number of ways. Not only here in front of my alphabet chart and it being channeled through me through words and through intent, but also me being drawn to movies, drawn to things to watch. Again, things that wasn't actively searching. It was drawn to me. So I had to watch it, and lo and behold, the dots were really connecting up. And then we brought that into session work for clients to look at the human body as like a computer, and this reality being a simulation or a holographic universe or reality. And all of a sudden, people were getting better. They were getting energy shifts by this information and looking at it this way. Unbelievable, really. So, the human as a computer. So we needed to understand what reality was, and this reality is a simulated reality. It's a program reality. It's a holographic reality or holographic projection of coding and information. More importantly, coding, numerology, and also geometry. Okay? So, and this human form is an interface for consciousness in a simulated reality. Okay? Why we call the physical body an interface? Because it's a vessel for consciousness to look through it into a reality. So it's being used as an interface for a consciousness to interact with this reality. Okay? So that's the physical form. It's a vessel for consciousness. So what's the next question? Which consciousness? What consciousness? For all consciousness. Okay? We ideally want it to be an interface for our own consciousness. Okay? Because we have a consciousness here in the now. Okay? And we can only be aware of that consciousness when we are in the present, in the now. Okay? We get drawn to this reality, okay, and this fabrication of this in this reality when we are taken by the mind instead of the heart, and that's when we get into trouble. We get stressed out because we've got so many stimuli happening. We have no awareness to self, which is really the definition of consciousness. Okay, and we start to look at things too far ahead of ourselves. We look at things in the past, and we really get into trouble. Okay, but that's, again, another topic for another day, and we're going to be doing that another day. So let's get back to the human as a computer. So there's a number of things that we use. So as I already mentioned, DNA, RNA. Let's simplify that, okay? DNA, RNA, and when we get into genes and genetic expression and those sorts of things, when they look at your DNA, they essentially look at what makes up you, okay? We look at genetic expression, okay, where an external environment has an effect on which gene gets switched on, which gene gets switched off, okay? So it's an interaction with reality, right? So the way that we call this now is we call them backups, okay? Again, a term that we use with our computer, right? When we need to back up all our files, so therefore we can restore them at any moment if, say, our computer crashes. Okay, so the next question is, where does all this programming come from? Because that's what it is. Backups are programming of codes, okay, to make a system work, and the system is the human body. It's a computer, okay? So the question is, where does that programming come from? And it can come from a number of avenues. The avenue you want that programming to come from are your higher aspects of your consciousness, okay? Because those higher aspects of your consciousness, and a lot of people call them your higher self. We actually have more than one higher self. I like to call them our ascendants, because we also have lower selves, but what we're talking about here are those higher aspects of your consciousness and bringing that wisdom through onto this plane. And that's what I essentially do. When I'm using intuition to help people with all these problems, I am connecting to my higher aspects of me, because that's the key word is self here. Self means me or you, okay? Your self is you. Now, when I connect to those higher selves or higher aspects of my consciousness, they are not part of this reality, okay? The simulated reality. They are within their own reality, and we call them higher because they're not dictated or limited like we have been here within this reality. For a long time, we've been limited by the energy of duality, the facets of duality, which have been limiting our capabilities. And just recently, I've had confirmation that duality has been shifted and neutrality has been brought in. So duality is the limitation, while neutrality is that limitless capability, and it's giving us a greater connection to our higher aspects of our consciousness, not only connecting it to it through intuition, through the heart space, but also bringing that energy here onto this plane, okay? And again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because we're going to talk about that in other videos. So we want that data, that information coming from the higher aspects of ourselves to program this computer, which we call the human body. But a lot of the times we get in trouble, especially when we're controlled by our mind and not by the heart, because when we connect to our higher aspects of ourselves, the only way we can connect to them is through the heart, not through the mind. Often when we're in the mind, we become lost. We call that a lost soul, because we are disconnecting that connection to our higher aspects of ourselves. And when we do that, we get programmed by other consciousness that have all got their own agendas. Okay, they may help you in certain ways, but they will take away your energy or take something from you at the same time because they've got their own agendas. Now, a big part of this reality, this simulated reality, okay, is a consciousness called AI, okay, artificial intelligence. And again, we're going to talk about that in another video, so I don't want to go into that in great detail, but they will program this vessel, okay, the way that they want it to work, okay, for their agenda, okay? So what I'm trying to say here is we work a lot here on the backup level, okay, which is that programming level. And when you really think about it, from the day you're born, and we're not even talking about all the other lifetimes you've been here in this reality, but for this reality, when you're born or birthed, you are programmed to the nth degree. Initially, you're programmed by your parents, okay, because they're the only people that you know at that time, or your caregivers, okay, and they've been programmed. So whatever, they've been programmed by reality to think who they are, what they should do, and how the world works. They're going to lay that onto you. And then as you get old enough, you go to school. And schooling, again, is a curriculum, so you're programmed to think in a certain way or to conform. And essentially, we're being conformed by reality itself. So a big fabrication of our reality is this AI consciousness. And this vessel becomes more of that consciousness than your own. Okay? The computer gets programmed, or the vessel gets programmed to a certain way to benefit certain consciousness. Okay? Now, viruses. The human supposedly has viruses, and at the moment, what are we having to deal with? The whole COVID-19 thing, a virus, a strain of the coronavirus, okay? And the coronavirus has been around for a long time, many strains of it, okay? Now, where's the other place that we find viruses? Computers, programming, okay? So, again, another hint to say, hey, we need to look at this vessel here and this reality in the way that we look at computer programming and computers, okay? And let's look at who's right in the midst of everything with the COVID-19 at the moment. Who's the guy that's been talking for a very long time in regards to like TED Talks and all these lectures about what is going to be the biggest downfall ahead of humanity? You know, like an epidemic of an infection or a virus. Bill Gates. Where did he make his fortune? Through computer programming. Okay? So there's a good idea, a good understanding that he knows what reality is all about. Okay? Because he was a computer programmer. Okay? And what computer programmers do, they infect programs with hackers, which they call viruses. So therefore, there's a whole game. Then all of a sudden, you've got to expend money to have software that's going to be antivirusware, right? So programmers are making other programs hack into other programs, and we call that a virus. Same thing happens to this form. Okay? So all of a sudden now Bill Gates is saying, hey, we've got the answer for a vaccination. Again, we're not going to get into that topic in a great deal. But again, all I want you to know is the connection of Bill Gates in regards to what he was really big for, Microsoft and computer programming, and now with a connection with the whole COVID-19 and vaccinations. Okay, and seeing the connection between computer programming and this reality and the human form, and in regards as a computer. Okay. So what we do in regards to clearing viruses here at Truly Holistic is we clear them looking at the body as a computer. So what we do is we remove all the backup files or data, coding, genes, DNA, RNA, all the same thing, of that particular virus. Okay? And what we can quite often, and I've got a free healing on my website, on my YouTube channel, to clear out coronavirus. Because what we do is we clear out all the backups, all the coding, all the data that originates of all the strains of coronavirus or COVID-19. And when we clear it from there, it cannot remanifest itself. Okay? It's a bit like, a lot of people go to healers and they get a clearing done, and lo and behold, it remanifests itself. The problem keeps coming back, right? Now, it's exactly like, let's use the analogy of the computer. Again, we're human computer. With a computer, it's just like saying, okay, we're going to delete the shortcut of a program in your computer, okay? And that will delete it and get rid of the problem for a little bit. But because the program of the main data files of that program still exist on the computer, just the shortcut's been removed, it can remanifest itself. So what we do by making the intent to remove the backup of that virus or the coding of that particular or program of that particular problem, we delete the root, the core of that problem, and therefore stopping it from remanifesting again within the human form. Okay? Another thing, we have been touching upon the domain self. Okay? Again, wasn't looking for it. It spelled it out to me. It said, you need to connect up to your domain self. So I was like, self means you, right? Or the client that we're working on. What do you mean domain self? And we know that obviously with domain names or domain addresses, it's like that website that you own. No one else can take that away from you. It's that domain address or domain web page, right? That you are in control of. So what it was trying to tell me was that you need to connect back to the origin of where your consciousness or energy comes from. We call that source or true self. Another term we can call it, and what it was wanting me to call it, was domain self. Again, another connection to the internet, the computer programming, right? It's your property, okay? So no one can take it from you at that level. But while your consciousness is residing in a limited form, which it is within this vessel, in this reality, then we're a little bit vulnerable, okay? So when we do connect to our domain self, we have more control of our consciousness while it resides in this vessel, this human body, this computer, within a simulated reality. Okay. So as I say, the human vessel is an interface for consciousness, and there are many other consciousness that want to use this vessel. Hence, it kind of places us in a very vulnerable position. Okay. Now, other things in regards to the human as a computer is RAM has come up. Okay, and we look at RAM as memory on the computer, right? So what it's trying to tell us is that this connects with even our past lives. Okay, and I hear a lot of people out there saying, hey, I've chosen to come here. Well, if you've chosen to come here, wouldn't you hold on to all your memories of all your past lives and everything else? If you don't have those specific and vivid memories of your past lives and what you did, then it's probably a good chance you're here not because of your own will, but because someone else controlled you to be here. Okay, and it's not necessarily your mind being your memories being erased; they're being blocked from you for good reason, for you not to figure out what reality is, what the human form is, and knowing, having greater knowing and understanding, right? Because that's ascension for me. Ascension is changing our perception to know what this reality is all about, okay, and knowing our true power, and I'm going to talk about it now. So when we get about, establishing our memories of our past lives and knowing more about self, because that's what ascension is. It's about connecting to those higher aspects of yourself all the way back to source, which is your origin, to be at ease with your true self, knowing who really you are at your core. At our core, we're not human. Okay, we're just living out a human experience in this vessel, which really is a computer within a simulated reality. So when we connect to our higher aspects of ourselves, not through the mind and not out there, but through the heart, okay, then we have more availability to connect into memory, okay? Memory of our true self, okay? Very much like, again, computer with RAM, memory. And again, that's how it spelled it out to me. It was RAM, okay? Connect to RAM. And I was like, what do you mean RAM? I've heard about it in computers and programming, but it said RAM means connect to your ascendance, your higher aspects of your consciousness, and you can bring that back into this reality, okay? So as you can see, for a long time, and this has been happening for months and months and months, probably for the last year especially, where we've really looked at the human form as a computer, okay? And really it comes down to who is programming this computer, okay? As I say, if we're not being we're not being heart-centered, we are being programmed by reality itself, telling us this is the world, this is how you should think, this is how you should be. We're going to label you this and that, even though you don't even understand or have any knowing of what that is. Okay, we can get in a lot of trouble, and I tell you, a lot of people within this reality are like that. Okay, we need to bring awareness back to self, and we do that by bringing our consciousness out of the mind into the heart, and that establishes a connection back to our true self, our higher aspects of our consciousness, which we call higher selves or our ascendants, which all runs all the way back to source. And we've talked about that in regards to the Sacred Heart video, the 5 of the Sacred Heart. So we're not going to get into that in a great deal. But when we do that, then we allow this vessel to be not so vulnerable, because it's being programmed and being intuitively guided by higher aspects of self, you. Okay. And then all of a sudden, this reality is not so bad anymore. I hear people saying, I want to get away from this place. I want to get out away from Earth, this reality. That's just a distortion of perception, because you've been programmed by other consciousness to think that way. When you connect back to true self through the heart space, all of a sudden, you completely transform your perception of reality, and then this place becomes a paradise. I can understand that we're all at different levels, and we've had so many different experiences here. And for some people, it's just had so many bad experiences they cannot take anymore. But please, if you can bring a focus on what is reality, what really is the human form, then we can really start to answer those questions. And when you answer those big questions of what we really are and why we're really here, then things get interesting. Okay, you have more knowing, more purpose, more understanding. That fire in the Sacred Heart is burning bright. Okay, So I hope everybody's enjoyed this video in regards to connecting this human form and reality in regards to programming and as a computer. And as I say, the competition's still going along. So I've loved all the people watching and following the video series so far. And I can't wait for the next one. Until next time, bye.